Before we drop into the void, quick question for you. If Mercy could change the fate of an entire galaxy, would you take the shot or lower the gun? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy high-stakes sci-fi where humans rewrite the rules of survival, tap like, subscribe, and stay with us. This story only gets bigger from here. Jax Calder had learned long ago that the galaxy preferred its truth sterilized. Clean reports. Confirmed kills. No lingering questions that could crawl back into a boardroom and start screaming. That was why the Coalition paid mercenaries instead of philosophers. And that was why Jax was knee-deep in black soil on a planet no map bothered to name, tracking something every sane species agreed should never be left alive. The Predator's designation scrolled across his visor in sterile white glyphs. Apex class. Planet Breaker lineage. Responsible for the extinction of 3 colonial outposts and the disappearance of an entire patrol fleet. The briefing footage had shown twisted hulls drifting like bones, power cores cracked open as if something had bitten them. The analysts called it savagery. Jax saw efficiency. The jungle around him breathed in slow, wet rhythms. Trees taller than towers locked their canopies together, blocking out the star. The air tasted metallic, charged the way it did before lightning or violence. His boots sank silently into the loam as he moved, rifle balanced but not raised. He wasn't afraid. Fear wasted oxygen. What tightened his jaw was familiarity. Every world with a bounty like this told the same story. Something old. Something territorial. Something the galaxy tried to erase instead of understand. His tracker pulsed, drawing him toward a ravine split open by orbital fire. Charred stone and fused crystal marked where a Coalition cruiser had tried to end the problem from a safe distance and failed. Jax followed the signs down, every instinct warning him he was already inside the Predator's domain. Claw marks scored the rock walls, not frantic, not defensive. Deliberate. A declaration written in gouges. The lair opened beneath a curtain of hanging roots. Heat rolled out in waves, heavy and alive. Jax eased forward, weapon finally rising as his visor compensated for the dark. He expected bulk. Thanks. The kind of presence that bent gravity around itself. What he found instead made his finger loosen on the trigger. The cub lay curled against the stone, no larger than a cargo sled, its armored hide still soft in places where growth hadn't finished its work. One flank was torn open, burned by shrapnel from the orbital strike. Its breathing came in shallow, furious huffs, each one ending in a low, instinctive growl. When its eyes snapped open, they were bright and terrified and far too aware. It lunged. Jax barely shifted aside, the impact glancing off his armor and slamming the cub back against the wall. The sound it made wasn't the roar from the briefing videos. It was pain raw and unfiltered. The kind that didn't care about reputations or extinction statistics. Jax froze, rifle trained, seconds stretching thin as wire. Protocol screamed at him to finish it. A wounded apex grew into a vengeful one. Every mercenary knew that. But Protocol didn't account for size, or the way the cub's claws scraped uselessly at stone as it tried to stand and failed. Didn't account for the faint chemical tang in the air that marked fear, not aggression. Jax exhaled and powered down his weapon. The cub hissed, confused, muscles coiled for another charge that never came. Jax lowered himself slowly, movements exaggerated, palms open. He toggled his suit's medkit, the gel inside humming as it activated. He spoke without realizing it, voice low, steady, the same tone he'd once used on a feral dog scavenging a battlefield on a border moon. "I'm not here for you." The words didn't matter. The intent did. He inched closer, every step a gamble against a creature born to shred battleships. The cub snapped once, a weak show, then sagged. Jax worked quickly, sealing burned flesh, stabilizing shattered bone. The cub trembled beneath his hands, heat pouring off it in waves that fogged his visor. When he was done, he backed away, heart finally pounding hard enough to notice. He tagged the lair with a scrambled beacon, one that would tell Coalition sensors nothing useful at all. His report would say the target had moved deeper into the planet. Unconfirmed. Dangerous to pursue. Enough truth to hide the lie. As he turned to leave, the jungle went silent. Not the quiet of night, but the absence of sound, as if the world itself had inhaled and refused to breathe out. Jax felt it then, a pressure that settled over his shoulders, vast and focused. He didn't look back. Looking back felt like a challenge. Something immense shifted far below the surface, a resonance that traveled through stone and bone alike. The cub lifted its head and released a call that was no longer afraid. It was answered. Jax broke into a run, every survival instinct screaming that mercy had consequences. By the time he reached his ship and punched through the canopy, the planet behind him shuddered. Sensors flared red across his console, then steadied as if whatever had awakened chose not to follow. Not yet. As his ship cleared orbit, a single thought settled in his mind, heavy and unavoidable. He hadn't spared a monster. He had stepped into a bond older than contracts and fleets. And somewhere below, a mother had found her child alive. Jax Calder did not believe in clean escapes. Space had taught him that every action shed a wake, and something always followed. His ship cut a quiet arc away from the planet, engines tuned low, heat bled into the void in disciplined trickles. He kept his hands steady on the controls, but his mind replayed the ravine in brutal clarity. The cub's eyes. The silence that followed. The sense of being measured by something too large to announce itself. Coalition Command broke in before he could finish his first system sweep. Their signal carried the clipped impatience of people who expected obedience, not nuance. They wanted confirmation. Visual proof. A body or the closest thing an apex predator left behind when it died. Jax fed them his report, voice flat, data sanitized. Target displaced. Terrain unstable. Pursuit not advised. He could almost hear the analysts grinding their teeth. They signed off with thinly veiled suspicion and an order to hold position at the system's edge. A verification fleet was en route. The words settled like frost in Jax's chest. Fleets didn't verify. Fleets erased. He killed the channel and leaned back, letting the hum of the ship fill the space where guilt might have grown. He told himself he'd done what he always did. Made a call in the field. Adapted. Survival depended on that. Still, his fingers hovered over the NAV console, resisting the urge to run. Leaving now would look like confession. On the planet below, the jungle slowly found its voice again. Heat rippled through the lair as the cub stirred, its breathing deeper, steadier. Pain dulled into a distant throb. The scent of the human lingered, sharp and unfamiliar, braided with something else that did not belong to prey. The mother returned on soundless limbs, her presence folding the shadows inward. She saw the sealed wound. The traces of orbital fire. The absence of blood where there should have been death. She tasted the air and understood. Above the atmosphere, the first coalition ships slid into real space like knives parting fabric. Heavy hulls, bristling with weapons designed to solve problems at a distance. Their arrival lit Jax's sensors with a bloom of signatures that made his ship feel suddenly fragile. He opened a private channel, flooding it with warnings he knew would be logged and ignored. The Predator was not cornered. The strike zone was compromised. Delay would be prudent. Command responded with rehearsed calm. The Predator had already demonstrated unacceptable threat potential. Collateral risk was authorized. His contract was complete. He was to observe and transmit. Jax muted them and stared at the planet's curve. He'd seen exterminations before. They were efficient in the way a wildfire was efficient. No room for restraint, no memory left behind to argue later. He wondered if the cub could run. If it would try. The first barrage struck the upper canopy in incandescent sheets. Forest became steam. Stone ran like water. The ships adjusted, tightening their pattern, confident in the language of overwhelming force. Jax's ship shuddered as the planet answered. It began as a vibration too low for sound, resonating through hull and bone alike. Instruments flickered, struggling to categorize what they felt. Gravity spiked, then twisted as if something below was standing up and pulling the world with it. One cruiser lost formation, its shields flaring under stress they weren't designed to absorb. Jax's breath caught. He knew that sensation now. The same pressure he'd felt in the ravine, magnified beyond reason. From the planet's surface, a roar climbed through atmosphere and vacuum alike, riding frequencies that ignored the rules of space. It was not rage alone. It was declaration. The fleet hesitated, a fractional pause that betrayed fear, and in that pause Jax understood the scale of his mistake. Sensors lit with a singular mass breaching orbit without engines, without warning. The mother rose on a column of distorted gravity, her form vast enough to eclipse stars. Hull plating buckled as her passage warped space itself. She did not strike blindly. She moved with intent sharpened by recognition. Her attention brushed Jax's ship and slid away, uninterested. The scent was wrong. Familiar. Protected. The fleet opened fire. Beams that had cracked moons lanced toward her and bent, dragged off course as if embarrassed by their own arrogance. She answered with a sweep of force that tore a destroyer in half, not exploding it but unmaking the space it occupied. Panic rippled through the command channels, voices climbing over one another as formations dissolved. Jax sat frozen, the observer no longer invisible. His ship's transponder flared as systems struggled to compensate for the gravitational chaos. He knew then that he had become a variable no contract could contain. On the planet below, the cub lifted its head as the sky burned, unafraid. Above, the mother turned, placing herself between the fleet and the world she guarded, her presence a living verdict. Jax opened a channel not to command but to anyone still listening. His voice carried through the noise, steady despite the storm he'd helped summon. "Stand down," he said. "You're not the threat she's here for." The mother roared again, and this time the fleet understood it as a promise. The battle had only just begun, but the outcome was already changing, pulled into a new shape by a single moment of mercy that refused to stay small. Jax Calder watched the fleet from the viewport, each ship a gleaming monument to arrogance. They had expected obedience, precision, the quiet satisfaction of a completed contract. Instead, they faced a predator that moved with intelligence beyond algorithms, with a fury that made even the heaviest dreadnoughts tremble. The mother had risen from the planet's depths like a living storm, her presence bending space, her intent clear. She did not attack blindly, she hunted with purpose, and her gaze had already passed over the human who had spared her cub. Sensors flared red across Jax's console as the fleet scrambled. Weapons powered up, shields calibrated, fighter wings cut across orbit with synchronized precision. Confidence radiated from the command hulls, a stubborn insistence that raw power alone could bend reality. Jax knew better. The mother was not an obstacle to be overcome, she was a reckoning. He maneuvered his ship toward the fleet, keeping distance while attempting to read the battlefield. Every instinct screamed caution. Every metric screamed catastrophe. He could feel the gravitational distortions rolling off her like invisible waves, each pulse threatening to tear ships from orbit. Yet she moved with surgical precision, avoiding planetary infrastructure, ignoring debris that would have claimed entire squadrons. It was not destruction for its own sake. It was judgment. One destroyer, bold or foolish enough to continue its approach, ignited its weapons. Plasma lances streaked through the void, aiming for the colossal silhouette. Jax's chest tightened as he watched the beams bend, folding like water around the predator's form. She reached out, though not in hands, and the destroyer's hull collapsed inward, metal streaming apart as if it had never existed. No explosion, no fireball. Just absence. A calculated erasure that left the rest of the fleet trembling. Jax's comm system lit up with frantic chatter. Pilots shouted over each other, admirals barked orders that could not be obeyed, and amid it all, he realized he was the only one observing with clarity. Mercy had become leverage, a shield he could neither explain nor control. His presence on the battlefield mattered only because she recognized the human who had shown compassion. Every move she made reinforced the bond he had unknowingly forged. The cub stirred below, its cries faint but insistent, carrying through layers of atmosphere and armor. Jax imagined the mother responding, recalibrating her wrath, distinguishing friend from foe with instinct more precise than any targeting computer. The fleet had assumed this was indiscriminate vengeance. They were wrong. She was selective, intelligent, maternal. And every decision she made sent a clear message: harm what is guilty, spare what is innocent. Jax tried to communicate with the fleet, his voice cutting through static and panic. "Cease fire. She's not here for you." But the words barely reached the ears of commanders whose panic had stripped them of reason. He leaned closer to the console, fingers flying over controls, broadcasting every sensor reading, every anomaly, every proof of selective aggression. It was not enough. Their arrogance was heavier than the void, and it was tangible in every failed maneuver. The mother pivoted toward his ship, not with hostility but recognition. Jax felt the pull before his instruments even registered it, a subtle distortion that rocked the hull, like a finger tracing the spine of the vessel. He held steady, eyes narrowing. She was not a threat to him. Not yet. Not ever, perhaps. And in that moment, he understood the fragile, unspoken truce his mercy had forged. It was a covenant written in instinct and survival, unacknowledged by law or contract. Fighters strafed past, weaving toward her with reckless precision. Each one faltered under her scrutiny. Wings bent, engines stalled, systems overloaded. She did not destroy every craft. She disabled, redirected, and reshaped the battlefield. Jax realized she was teaching the fleet a lesson they had never asked to learn. Power without understanding was meaningless. Precision did not come from weapons alone. It came from perception, from the capacity to recognize intent, and from the restraint to act only when necessary. The mother's gaze returned to Jax, and for a heartbeat, the chaos of battle dissolved into clarity. He saw in her eyes a reflection of what he had always known about humanity, that mercy, though fragile and costly, was a force that even the universe respected. He felt her measure him, acknowledging his choice, weighing it against all the destruction around them. And then she shifted, not to attack, but to intercept a squadron that had violated her warning. The engagement was brutal yet controlled, precise and terrifying, leaving the remaining fleet trembling and hesitant. Jax exhaled slowly, leaning back from the console, realizing he had become a linchpin in an event the galaxy would misinterpret for centuries. The mother had altered the course of strategy, of command, of arrogance itself, all because of one human's decision to spare life. He did not feel pride, only a sober recognition of responsibility. The cub's safety was now inextricably tied to his own, and the mother's vigilance left no room for error. The fleet began to retreat, fractured and fearful, their cohesion shattered by something they could neither predict nor control. In the wake of their withdrawal, Jax navigated his ship toward the planet, observing the mother's return to orbit. She did not pursue. She did not need to. Her message had been delivered with a clarity the galaxy rarely achieved. Threat must be understood, mercy can command power, and the bond between human and predator could reshape outcomes on a scale no one anticipated. Jax's mind raced as he reviewed the sensor data, the raw magnitude of her capabilities, the precision of her strikes. He understood now that mercy was not weakness, it was strategy, and it carried consequences heavier than any fleet's guns. The mother had not spared him out of sentiment. She had recognized an ally in an unexpected form, and she had answered that recognition with force calibrated to correct arrogance without unnecessary loss. As the planet's atmosphere settled once more and the remaining ships limped away, Jax felt the weight of the moment settle over him. The mother descended, returning the cub to safety, her immense form folding into shadowed layers of jungle that only she could navigate. He knew that the galaxy would not comprehend what had occurred. They would call it a miracle or an anomaly, but he understood the truth. One human's choice had redirected the course of a system's history. And somewhere deep in the jungle, a predator waited, patient and precise, her attention fixed, her judgment unwavering, and her bond with a human sealed by the act of mercy. Jax Calder watched the remnants of the fleet scatter across the void, hulls scorched, engines faltering, pride shattered. The coalition had sent dreadnoughts and strike wings, confident in the safety of numbers and firepower, yet the mother had made short work of their assumptions. She moved with intent, her massive form a blend of precision and raw power, striking only where arrogance persisted. Jax knew that what he had begun with mercy was now being carried forward with a force that dwarfed anything the galaxy could claim as dominance. The first cruiser attempted to regroup, firing blindly in panic. Jax felt the pull of her awareness even from orbit, sensed the weight of her gaze as it swept across the craft. Shields buckled under a pressure that seemed to bend the rules of reality itself. With a subtle shift, the cruiser's engines collapsed inward, leaving nothing but twisted metal drifting silently. It was a calculated response, not destruction for spectacle. Every strike reinforced the lesson she was delivering. Power without wisdom was meaningless. Jax took a deep breath, opening a channel to the remaining vessels. "Stand down," he commanded, voice steady despite the chaos. "She is not here to kill indiscriminately. You have to listen." Static answered him at first, then faint replies, hesitant and uncertain. Pilots transmitted warnings back, sensors registering anomalies they could not explain. The mother's force was selective, her wrath surgical, and it was reshaping the battlefield in real time. Jax realized he was the only one capable of bridging comprehension and survival. Below, the jungle absorbed the echoes of the conflict. The cub stirred again, dragging itself through undergrowth with the resilience only youth could muster. Its mother returned to orbit for a moment, her enormous silhouette casting a shadow over the forest. Jax noted the subtle changes in the gravitational field, the way debris shifted in her presence, the precise way she avoided harming the world she defended. She was a force of nature, yes, but one guided by intention. The fleet faltered, command structures breaking down as panic spread. Signals crossed and collided, orders contradicted by instinctual fear. Jax's warnings became more than guidance, they were lifelines. Pilots hesitated mid-attack, recalculated, and slowly began to recognize the patterns of precision rather than chaos. The mother's engagement was teaching them to read consequence, to measure intent, and to understand that violence alone could never win this encounter. Jax adjusted his trajectory to maintain visual contact while keeping the cub and planet within sensor range. Every strike she delivered was mirrored by restraint. She destroyed engines, disabled weapons arrays, and left hulls intact when the crew demonstrated submission or retreat. Each action sent a message: those who respected her rules survived, those who ignored them did not. Jax felt a grim satisfaction in the lesson she was imposing, one his own choice had set into motion. The command ship of the fleet tried to establish order, broadcasting threats and attempts at negotiation. Jax intercepted, relaying his own sensor readings, translating her behavior into terms the human mind could grasp. She responds to mercy, he explained into the channel. Every attack she makes is conditional. Stop firing, comply, survive. The messages were met with disbelief, fear, and the slow dawning of comprehension. The fleet's retreat became methodical rather than chaotic, guided by recognition of the predator's patterns. In the center of the chaos, Jax felt the weight of responsibility settle fully upon him. Mercy had turned into leverage and leverage into survival. His bond with the mother predator, invisible to all but him, shaped outcomes on a scale he had never anticipated. He navigated through debris fields and fractured orbits, ensuring that no ship crossed thresholds that would reignite her wrath. Every decision he made carried the potential to protect or condemn. The mother moved with a deliberate grace, returning the cub to the jungle once the immediate threat had been neutralized. Jax observed the reunion from orbit, the subtle movements of her massive frame, the protective curling of her body around the young one. She did not linger, her task had been accomplished. She had enforced consequences without unnecessary destruction, safeguarded the innocent, and demonstrated a lesson no fleet manual could teach. Jax exhaled, letting the tension ease as much as it could. The remaining ships had retreated beyond immediate reach, hulls damaged but intact. Sensors confirmed the cub's safety. The mother had departed orbit, descending into shadowed valleys where her presence could not be observed but could still be felt. Jax realized that the galaxy would misunderstand the events, labeling them miracle, anomaly, or divine intervention. The truth was simpler. One human had chosen restraint, and that choice had reverberated across an entire system. For the first time in years, Jax allowed himself a moment of reflection. The cost of survival had never been a simple measure of lives or contracts. It had been judgment, intuition, and courage, threaded together in ways few could recognize. He had not only preserved life, he had reshaped the outcome of a conflict that might have annihilated thousands. Mercy had become strategy, and strategy had earned him protection from a predator more ancient and intelligent than the galaxy's fleet had ever accounted for. As the system settled into uneasy calm, Jax set his ship on course to report back, or at least to survive long enough to frame the story he would need to tell. The mother's presence lingered in every reading, every vibration, every gravitational anomaly he recorded. The cub, now quiet, had become a silent witness to the bond that had been forged. The galaxy had been reminded, in a manner it would not soon forget, that raw power alone did not define dominance. Humanity, flawed, stubborn, and capable of mercy, had asserted itself in a way even the most formidable predator respected. And somewhere beneath the canopy the mother waited. She did not need to hunt. She had already delivered judgment. She had already remembered the human who had acted with restraint. In that memory and in the lingering presence of her protection, the story of the system had changed, and the ripple of one act of mercy continued to expand, unseen but undeniable. Jax Calder drifted through the aftermath like a ghost in a galaxy that refused to understand him. The Coalition's fleets had retreated, crippled and humiliated, yet they still sent messages filled with indignation and thinly veiled threats. He ignored them. Every transmission reminded him that the galaxy's bureaucracy could not grasp what had happened, and that was fortunate. Some truths, he realized, could only be understood in the field, by those willing to witness them with their own eyes. He glanced at his ship's sensors, still picking up faint distortions where the predator had vanished. The cub, now hidden deep within the planet's jungles, had already begun exploring its small world with cautious curiosity. Jax imagined its mother watching, ensuring safety from shadows it could not perceive. The predator's presence was a constant, invisible weight, a force neither ally nor adversary but a reckoning in its purest form. For Jax, it was also a reminder that choices carried consequences far beyond any contract, any calculation of risk. Back at the Coalition, the reports were chaos. Commanders struggled to reconcile sensor data with reality. Ships were intact yet non-functional, crews shaken beyond repair, and the apex predator they had been certain would be eradicated had left no corpses, no trophies, only a lingering demonstration of power and judgment. Analysts called it an anomaly. Historians would call it a miracle. Jax knew better. It was respect earned in the smallest of gestures, a human's mercy toward a cub too young to die. Word spread through fringe systems and mercenary circles almost immediately. A human had walked into the lair of a predator considered untouchable, spared life, and survived. Not only survived, but emerged as a mediator of forces the galaxy thought untamable. Jax had not sought recognition. He had sought survival. Yet now he was sought out, contacted by independent colonies and private militias hoping to engage a human capable of operating where fleets feared to tread. His reputation, forged in a single act, now preceded him. Alone in his ship, he considered the weight of it all. He had always been a soldier of circumstance, a mercenary who thrived on contracts and calculations. But this bond with a creature older than war, stronger than fear, had changed the parameters of his life. He realized that strength was not measured in firepower, nor courage in willingness to kill. True strength was understanding when to act, when to show restraint, and when to step into uncertainty without hesitation. Weeks passed and the system began to stabilize. Mining colonies returned cautiously, scanning the orbit for remnants of the Predator's passage. Jax lingered at the edge, watching the planet, recording subtle gravitational anomalies, documenting what he could. He understood that he could never fully control what had happened, but he could bear witness, ensuring that if the galaxy ever returned in force, there would be evidence of restraint, intelligence, and mercy, a precedent it had never known. The mother and cub remained a shadowed constant in his sensors, moving quietly, observing, protective. He sensed an intelligence beyond instinct, a calculating patience that mirrored his own in ways he had never recognized until now. The Predator had not forgiven him. It had acknowledged him, recognized his choice as a signal that could be trusted. That acknowledgement, though silent and unspoken, carried more weight than any treaty, any contract, any alliance the galaxy could draft. When the Coalition finally attempted to reassert presence, Jax intercepted their probes and broadcasted a warning in clear, uncompromising terms. "You will not approach the system without risking annihilation," he said, his voice steady over channels designed for command fleets. "She is watching. The cub is safe. Any further aggression will be met with consequences you cannot comprehend." His words carried the authority of someone who had survived impossible odds and earned the respect of a force the galaxy had been too arrogant to measure. The Coalition paused, unprepared for resistance that defied their understanding. And in that hesitation, Jax realized the true scope of his actions. Mercy had transformed into power, restraint into influence. A single decision, a moment of compassion, had shifted the balance in a system that measured victory only by destruction. He was no longer simply a mercenary. He had become a guardian, a witness, and, in a way, a negotiator between human ambition and a force the galaxy had never respected. The final test arrived without warning. A scout ship attempted a breach, slipping through sensor nets in the belief that subtlety could avoid consequence. Jax tracked it immediately, warning the crew as they entered the planet's gravity well. Above the atmosphere, a ripple moved through the clouds, subtle at first, then undeniable. The mother emerged, her colossal form stretching across the horizon like a shadow cast by destiny. Her eyes locked on the intruders, and Jax felt the weight of her presence even through calm silence. The scout fired, and for a heartbeat the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, with precision that left no room for misinterpretation, the ship was disabled, its engines shredded, weapons neutralized. Not a single life lost. The mother had delivered judgment with restraint, reaffirming the lesson. Arrogance was punishable, innocence was protected. The galaxy would remember this encounter not for the destruction she could have wrought, but for the intelligence she wielded, and for the human who had earned that respect. Jax exhaled, feeling the culmination of every choice, every hesitation, every act of mercy settle within him. He understood now that survival was not enough. Influence, understanding, the courage to act against expectation, these were what defined true strength. The mother and cub vanished into the jungle once more, leaving orbit calm, sensors stable, and the system intact yet profoundly altered. He set his course for the edge of the system, eyes on the stars, mind already tracing paths where his reputation and his bond might shape future encounters. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Humans were unpredictable, capable of mercy, and sometimes that mercy commanded forces no weapon could match. And Jax Calder, a man who had once counted survival as victory, now understood that a single act of compassion could echo across light years, reshape fleets, and redefine what it meant to hold power. As he entered hyperspace, the last image of the planet lingered in his mind. The cub safe, the mother vigilant, the jungle alive with quiet authority. the galaxy would never see the system the same way again. And somewhere deep within the folds of space and instinct, a predator had remembered a human who had acted with restraint, a bond unspoken but indelible, a story that would ripple far beyond the stars.